King had a dream. I am the dream. Dr. King had a dream. I am the dream. Dr. King had a dream. I am the dream. Dr. King had a dream. I am the dream. Dr. King had a dream.
My name is Corinne or Corey. I'm a high school senior from Chicago, Illinois, and I am a visual artist, graphic designer, painter, drawer, all of that jazz. Yeah, in the past year, I kind of was thrown into the world of graphic design. I've always been dabbling in art, visual art, but being 16 last summer and without a driver's license and in a home with at-risk adults, I wasn't able to really mobilize the way that I wanted to. So kind of had to turn to my remote skills to participate the way that I did want to. And that became doing graphic design and infographics and things like that for grassroots social justice organizations, specifically Don't Shoot Portland, which I'm so grateful for that opportunity. And since then, I've kind of just been, my mission is using a skill, a gift really to spread information rather than just pretty pictures, which are nice. But for me, I really want to have a purpose with everything that I do. So yeah, that's me.
Hey everyone, my name is Barak. I use he, him pronouns. I am an Egyptian American organizer, activist, and abolitionist. I was born in Portland, left for many years. I do mutual aid work. I'm the program director for the Peacekeeper Society. That is an indigenous-led organization that mobilizes tribal trainers and wisdom keepers to pass on information and traditions to the next generation. But since the pandemic, the focus has been more mutual aid and providing basic needs for those living on reservations and indigenous populations, regardless of enrollment status. I also am a longtime DSP volunteer, and this summer, Teresa, Ty, and I got a mutual aid program started, getting water to Warm Springs, as well as providing support for protests and a lot of the youth marches that were happening over the summer.
Hi, my name's Ariana. I am Miss Black Teen Oregon International Ambassador 2020, and I'm also an activist in Portland. I started activism about 5 years ago when I was 12, and the first march that I ever went to was actually a Don't Shoot march. So I've came a long way in my activism. I've organized so many marches. I've been out on the front line since day one, and I just really want to see some change in the world, and I'm excited to be here to talk to everybody about my experiences and give my knowledge and wisdom to everybody else. And thank you for having me.
My name is Danny. I use he, him pronouns. Funny also that I started activism when I was really little, going to Don't Shoot marches. This summer, I worked with the mayoral election and mutual aid, and I started my own mutual aid group here in Portland.
My name is Tiana. I use she, her pronouns. I mean, I get asked this question and it's kind of hard for me to like put myself in categories, but like I would say I'm an activist, I'm an organizer, I'm a nonconformist. I like have a deep rooted care for liberation for Black people, but also to uplift everyone in that process, because that's what Black liberation does. I began my activism also as a JIT in Portland about 5 years ago at a Don't Shoot PDX march. And I was born and raised in Portland, Oregon, and moved to California when I was 16 and continued my activism. I struggled trying to find a Black and an activist community in San Luis Obispo. But after the sort of George Floyd Uprisings of 2020, I found a community and began organizing a lot of marches and just organizing the community in any way that I could. But I was actually arrested in July of 2020, and I'm now facing 13 charges. And so right now I'm just trying to stay on my feet and stay just stay alive with all of that. But yeah, that's that's me.
Hey everybody, I'm Jacinda and I use they, them pronouns. I got my start in, deep activism and advocacy about 3 years ago here in Portland with an Oregon nonprofit. And I became an advocate and storyteller for reproductive justice. But I really feel that my advocacy grew exponentially when I found about Teresa Rayford's campaign and for Portland mayor. And after 2 years of following her on Instagram, that's actually the first thing she said to me. She's like, I know you from Instagram. And that's really where my advocacy took off. I learned so much from Teresa during that time. And after the primaries, there was a huge call for a write-in campaign because unfortunately we lost in the Portland mayoral primaries, but that didn't stop us there. And so I became a leader with Token Rose and Danny Cage for the Write-In Teresa Rayford campaign. And now I am volunteering with Don't Shoot long term. Can't get rid of me. And I'm really proud of the work that I was able to do with youth. My activism and advocacy is rooted in abolition, letting the youth lead, and always being able to evolve as we learn from other people's experiences. And I believe storytelling is a really, really important way to share our shared values and experiences to keep pushing us forward. Thank you.
My name is Sochi, and I use she, her pronouns. I've never really done anything like this. I have always kind of volunteered within our community, but I am kind of just a homebody, and I do a lot of art. And for me, art has always been a way to communicate and tell stories. And I've just felt the responsibility to tell stories and hope that people can engage in that art and take time to learn. But honestly, I'm just really inspired by the whole panel. All you guys are really young and doing a lot of things, and I'm here a lot to learn too.
Hi, I'm Joseph Blake, born and raised in Northeast Portland, right off of Alberta. And I'm a local photographer here and documenter. And over this past, I say, year and a half, I've actually stepped in the streets of becoming an activist and being on the forefront and documenting what I see and the perspectives that I capture and obtaining the image that actually happens rather than what we see on the media. And so just kind of making sure that my voice is heard and that the community I serve voice is heard. And yeah, I'm currently in school to be a teacher, just to continue that push and doing the work in the classroom as well to promote Black youth and any youth struggling. So, yeah.
Hi, my name is Andrew Tolman, they, them pronouns. I'm the founder of Fingers Crossed Interpreting, and we provide ASL interpretation for frontline activism, radical things like this, and drag shows, any marginalized group that needs a message to be shared. That's what we're here for. So thank you for having us.
My name is L'Oreal Aviles. I go by Lo. I use they and he pronouns, and I am an interpreter who often works with Fingers Crossed. Glad to be here.
Thank you for having me. It's really great to be here with you all. My name is Samuel Eisenmeyers. I am a visual artist and musician and work a lot within the houseless community in Portland and arts advocacy communities. I work with and run a small business with a group of collective of artists that bring power and autonomy back to the creative arts and bring ownership and equity into that conversation so we can have power and autonomy in the city of Portland. I've been painting and making music all my life.
No peace! No justice! No peace! No justice! No peace! No justice!
Definitely in the beginning of the uprising when I was at Don't Shoot every day and we were organizing things and just kind of seeing the way you were handling things, Teresa. Like for instance, when Black Resilience Fund was trying to give a bunch of money and you were not okay with like the profiting off of Black death, and using your voice to really like stand by what you believe in, but I've, always being respectful and speaking in a nonviolent way. And for me, it just really inspired me. Like one conversation we had about, it doesn't have to be a black and white conversation about what happens to Black people, to brown people, to Indigenous people. It can be a Black and brown conversation, and we don't need the opinion of the oppressor when it comes to how to move forward in our lives. And just like two tangible things that kind of came from that was me calling out a bunch of my ex-employers who had treated me unfairly and were racist. And one of those was a restaurant in Portland, Taqueria Nueve, where he had said a bunch of kind of anti-Arab and anti-Semitic things to me. And I tried to confront him in person, and he wasn't having it and just was gaslighting and being dismissive. And so I called him out publicly, and then tons of other victims came forward, and there ended up being articles written about it and kind of exposed this guy who was, not only culturally appropriating in his restaurant, but also treating like mostly his brown employees disrespectfully. And another thing that I learned while working at Don't Shoot and just being in that environment was when not to use my voice, and sort of when to make space for other people. And especially in this movement, knowing when it's the right time to speak out. And I feel like it's always the right time when you're advocating for yourself, but it's just so important to make space for those who are more marginalized, like specifically Black women, Black trans women, and Black people in general. And so kind of learning when it's more important to make that space for others was a big part of finding my own voice.
This past summer, I actually was also working as a storyteller nationally. And so I was able to learn about how to create our stories of self. And I think it's really important to share our story because, like Barack said, we need to understand the experiences of everybody here. And so this past summer, I was able to work with a bunch of youth to teach them how to share their stories. And I believe that my role is constantly evolving, but it's always been rooted in community engagement and fighting alongside other folks, not just centering one person, which tends to happen a lot. The savior complex really comes out in a lot of people. And so I always want to remind myself that this isn't just about one voice, but it's about listening to every single voice. And so with my work specifically on the writing campaign, I was able to connect with so many youth leaders. Danny slid into my DMs one day and was like, hey, have you heard about Teresa Rayford? And that sparked a huge movement. And I was able to learn from Danny. And I also saw like all of my transferable skills that I've learned. I learned how to create a political action committee due to many obstacles from a lot of white candidates here in Portland, but that also gave me so much experience for when somebody else wants to start their own political action committee or join another action committee or join a board. That's how we make our voices heard, of listening to each other, sharing our skills, because all of these skills are transferable, right? That's why we do this work. We want to teach other folks. That's why we're here today, activating our youth to show them, hey, this is how we do it and you can do it too. Our youth have so much to learn from everybody who's been doing this for so long. And there are so many youth here today that have been doing these actions since they were 12 years old, since they were very young. And I think that this last summer, I was really able to engage with way more youth after doing a lot of work on the state level with bills and whatnot. And now I see how the writing campaign made such an impact, especially on our youth. And yeah, I think that this past summer, it was a lot of work and a lot of, coming out to be almost reaching burnout. But when we share our stories and when we work together, we can move our work around, right? Like I said earlier, it's not to center one voice, but to spread out all of our skills that we've had and to make our movements stronger by working alongside each other.
I think being in a city like Chicago, like so big and simultaneously very diverse and very segregated, it's somewhere that there are so many voices, not all of them saying the right thing, or some of them may be a little too loud or too quiet. And I think for me, it was important to focus my voice in on something rather than just adding to the what seems like a choir happening. And so in the past year or so, I've kind of focused in on justice in terms of schooling and public education in Chicago, which has been historically inequitable and horrible for people in the south and west sides of the city. And so I've kind of focused my voice on both amplifying younger people, youth, and also looking at the student code of conduct and what's happening with police being called on students in school, police being in school, and things like that. So it's been kind of difficult, but at the same time, I think when we focus in on what we believe is something that can add to the solution or something that can dismantle the problem, it's a lot more effective, at least for young people like me or people in a big setting like Chicago. So that's kind of where I've been for the past few years, and especially the last year or so, and especially using my art and things of that sort to get that message out there. Those messages like capitalizing to being Black, recognizing the difference between Black and African American and things like that seems so simple, but a lot of times people disconnect Black Lives Matter and actual Black lives. And I think to have those discussions about how you're referring to people, how you're referring to the movement, it makes people think a little bit harder than just reposting a graphic or just putting something on their Instagram story. And I think that was really important for me to like put something in there that's not just like, hey, this is the picture that I made, but something that's like, a lot of people came to me like, I didn't know this, or do we capitalize this? Do we capitalize this? Like, and I'm like, hey, Google is free. I'm happy to help you, but I'm also not here to teach you. So I think I was grateful to have that opportunity and to have it have the spread that it did. At the same time, it made me realize like people really don't know, and they also don't put in the effort to know. So I think that was a lot that kind of drove me to do more things like that. Yeah.
Growing up, I've never been a great speaker. And so I had to figure out a way to use my voice. And I did that through imagery. So I learned at an early age that a picture says 1,000 words. So I could take moments that I was seeing and put them in perspective that I saw. And by that, I would write something like a small like paragraph about it, the situation that happened. But what I did in those images as I drew out that that voice I was trying to bring out myself. And so with that, conversations were made, and it helps people kind of get that uncomfortable feeling and like bring it to the forefront and have that conversation happen. And so with that, I just kept going and going with different pictures and different like moments in the movement. And so really, the reason why I use moments instead of the image is because like I wasn't trying to get a shot, I was trying to get the moment. And so a lot of times we view images as like, oh, that happened that day, but it's like, no, it's much more than just a picture. A story was told, someone was inspired, someone's life was changed. And so I wanted to keep doing that. And so that's how I use my voice through this. And so I've had youth reach out to me that are inspiring photographers and asking like, how can I use that platform to like help them? And like, I work with them and I walk through it, and I use the stuff that I learned in school just to kind of come out with imagery and just push the message. You make a good point when you were saying about like how people capture moments. And so what we see a lot of times is that news would cover the protests and they would describe it as like chaotic and all these other kind of negative words tying into the movement. And they would just put the perspective like it's like a bad things going on. So we need more police forces and that. When you're actually there and you're seeing the moments actually happening, you know it's a complete lie. And so the reason why this is so important to me is because that perspective that we all see when we're actually there is actually being put out there rather than what we see on the news, which is like they take the moment of like the anger that's being spewed out and direct into emotion of like, oh, hey, look what's happening here. We told you guys this is all a mess. This is not, but it's not. And so that's the reason why I do this.
My work last year, it's a little bit different trying to explain to someone in Portland or just anybody who's living in a city, because I feel like my story is more of a testament to small towns and small communities and the racism that is bred there, because a lot of times like people want to like point the finger to like the KKK, but it's like it's not that simple. So essentially San Luis Obispo, SLO for short, is a town of about 45,000 people. It's less than 2% Black, and it's a college town as well. It's specifically an ag college town, so it brings in a lot of like redneck community. And so I lived there for 4 years, and for the first about 3 years that I was there, I felt like more invisible than I ever have in life itself. It's like it was always difficult because like I always loved to express myself, whether it would be like with like creatively with the way I dress, or like art I would make, or just any capacity. And so it was hard when it's like you're standing face to face with like a lot of white people who are like, oh, you do the crime, you do the time type, or oh, I don't see color, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they're in such a bubble that they think it's appropriate. So I really learned that even when it is nerve-wracking, even when you do feel like emotionally you're shutting down, or just like even when you don't want to, you have to stand up and be loud, which people don't always appreciate that. But I've recognized in my personal work, that is what's got the most done. Like when I've stood up and been, quote, maybe irritating to some people who oppose this movement, because that's really like what you have to do is like the first step. I truly believe it's capturing people's attention. And of course, Black Lives Matter was a huge trend in a sense. It's bigger than a trend, but it was almost commodified into a trend over this last year and this last summer. But I mean, personally, like, I would use my voice to get people to these marches and have my small community, like our little Black activist clique, which may be like 15 people or less, and we would all share our own stories. And just like when a topic would come up, we would stop in the middle of everything and drop it and say, okay, we need to address this. We need to address this colorism. We need to address just this hierarchy that we're seeing. Like we need to address the white fragility that we're even seeing in this crowd, because yeah, they don't want to hear it, but like that's how you grow, is uncomfortable situations. So I think I've learned that I don't know, being in these uncomfortable situations is the best way that I can use my voice. And it hurts sometimes and it feels awkward or weird, but you always get paid back, like emotionally. And I don't know, it's how people learn.
You know, as Miss Black Teen Oregon, my platform is sexual misrepresentation. And within my platform, I talk about, you know, rape culture. There's just so much on the media that is false about women. You know, not all Black women are ghetto or ratchet. You know, a lot of Black women are successful, have their own businesses. There's just more to see than what you see on TV. So I spread my knowledge on, you know, these stereotypes and where they come from and why people shouldn't believe them, because one, they're not true. And secondly, Black women specifically are so disrespected. And the fact that these white or non-person of color producers, writers, filmmakers keep telling our stories, it's not okay. And they keep putting these false narratives on Black women all over the world, women of color, and it's just not fair to us. Because if you keep seeing a certain stereotype about somebody, people will really start believing that, and that's all they will see you as. You know, like it's kind of like being Black. Like people will always see me as Black no matter what. Like that's the color of my skin, you know. And I just use my voice to encourage women to be who they are. You know, if you want to be a sex worker, you go be that sex worker. If you want to be a lawyer, you go be a lawyer. Just don't I just always encourage people, not just women, just people, to always be themselves and to not let anybody stop them. And I feel like that's really important, because I was really insecure at one point, and I know that I needed these affirmations to stay confident. You know, there was a point where I did believe everything on the media about Black women. And so I see how hearing these things from other women changed me. And so it encouraged me to help others build that confidence.
I think the best thing, at least what I found over this summer, is if you see something, say something. And especially with young people, there's a lot of like negative thoughts that young people can't do anything. Young people can't, vote. What power do young people have? A lot of biases like that. And I found just over the summer of having conversations, finding out what we can do, if that's submitting testimonies, if that's plastering art in our community, if that is having conversations with the adults who aren't educated and switching the power dynamics from, the kid to the adult, and all these different things, that we are extremely powerful. And I think young people forget that young people are extremely powerful.
I was kind of thinking about what Joseph had said, because I'm really not a speaker either. You guys kind of pull me out of my shell to do this. But I think that really for me, art has always been my voice, whether it's documenting, my past or my present or my hopes for the future. I've really felt an obligation, to tell stories. And I felt like there were so many excuses being made. Even like particularly with George Floyd, what do people do and what do the media do? They tried to build this case like against him, like he did something. And it bothered me. It bothered me to a core that people still try to find options to make excuses. And as a mom, I didn't watch the video. It was a little bit too graphic for me to watch the video. I started it and then I turned it off. But one part that really resonated for me was when he called out to his mother. And I thought, man, I'm not Black, but I am a mom. And it was just an eye-opening perspective to me. Even though I've never trusted police myself because of my own family situations, I had to come to terms with the fact that that as an artist, I had a responsibility maybe to tell stories. And even though maybe I'm not a good talker, and I have asthma too, so I wasn't going out into a lot of the protests. I only went to one protest, but I felt pent up and I wanted to communicate, because I wanted people to be left with no option but to maybe view and gain knowledge. And so when I painted my mural downtown, I did it specifically with the idea of kind of like going way back, right? So we had all these current cases, people who, we talk about like a reckoning and a change and this, evolving society of people coming to terms, even if someone doesn't feel like they're racist, or even like a person of color, like I'm Mexican, right? I had to come to terms, and, Brock, you kind of hit on this about that idea of like when it's appropriate to kind of use your voice and when it's not. And I just had a realization that, man, there's nobody that suffers more sometimes than a Black mother. And just the daily fear in and out of like basic stuff. I had this lady come up to me when I was painting, and she was looking at Ayanna. Ayanna was killed 10 years ago. And really none of these kids have had justice. I mean, like if we had more time, I'd tap into that. But, she just kind of like started a conversation back and forth with me. And I did a lot of listening down there. And I realized how much art can move people. And I know what it does for me, but I had this real eye-opening experience, and her children were the same ages as my children. And she told me that she had this real basic fear. She was so glad that her daughter, who was 17, hadn't got a driver's license yet. And it was just like, I thought, man, in little ways, man, no matter how dramatic or traumatic my life has been, I know that both my kids can get their driver's license and I don't have to fear them being killed, right? And so it was just, I really, really, really wanted to paint kids whose stories went back even 20 years. Nicholas was killed over 20 years ago. His dad fought for 20 years to try to expose police brutality. And I just wanted people to be able to look at those kids and see them in a beautiful place, and understand that, you know, this problem is more than just what people have seen for the last year, because I think that so many people are just coming aboard, you know, trying to gain knowledge and education. But it's always a problem, and it's always been a problem. And so I just wanted people to kind of like really see some stories that maybe they didn't really know and that people don't talk about. And to who can make an excuse, right? Who can look at a child's face and then try to make an excuse? And they're just babies, you know, they're just babies. But it's just my way of talking, really. And I wanted people who don't get it to get it. I wanted the paint, like, yes, the painting was a tribute, like we talk about that, right? All the art being done as a tribute. And of course it's a tribute to these beautiful babies and to their mothers and to their families, right? But it's also about, it's the first time I ever had put written text with my art. And I wanted people to read the stories who maybe wouldn't normally take the time to educate themselves. I wanted people like on that other side of that spectrum. I wanted people who, you know, don't think they're racism, don't understand white fragility, people who just don't have a lot of knowledge, people who aren't activists, people who don't protest. I wanted people to walk by and look at it. I wanted children to walk by and read it. Particularly, yeah, I wanted white children. I wanted white people to look at it. But I really was hoping that it would kind of touch base in that, someone told me one time that there's 3 buckets in life, right? And there's bucket number 1. And if you're thinking about, it's just somebody who gets it, right? And it's innate and it's like compassionate, and it's just someone who understands, right? And no matter what our race is, someone who gets it, right? And then wants to make a change. And then there's someone who is in bucket 2, and it's someone maybe who didn't have that knowledge, but they're capable of growth and change by gaining that knowledge. And sometimes people in bucket 2 are just even more important than bucket 1, because when you come from the other side and then you change, there's just this whole eye-opening experience, you know, about how horrible it is. And then, you know, there's bucket 3 and nobody can fix bucket 3, right? But I really wanted to hit on bucket 2. I wanted to hit people who think they know, but they don't. And are privileged but don't feel privileged, and who maybe are kind of racist and don't know they're racist, or people who make excuses even just, you know, for their family and friends and everything. And so even though I'm not much of a speaker, I guess I wanted to do that through my piece. You know what else too was, man, I really truly saw for the first time, I honestly, maybe because of my own personal life choices, like I had my kids young, and you know, I never understood the importance of politics, to be real, you know, until my, you know, later on adult years as my children grew older, and I realized, wow, things really affect my family. Everything affects everybody's family, right? When I was, you know, I was familiar with all these cases as a mom, but then when I actually kind of dug deep into the research into the cases, I realized just how deeply rooted racism is in every aspect of our judicial system and political system. And it was just like this truly, I don't really know if I ever really knew until I really kind of tapped into these kids' cases, because at every aspect, these families hit a roadblock. From the second that the crime happens, being victim, they're treated like criminals. Her mother, or her grandmother, was treated like a criminal. In fact, they arrested her that night. It wasn't even, the warrant wasn't even for the right home. The person that they drew the warrant on didn't even live in the home. And they arrested her. She went through that horrific event and then was treated like a criminal. And then just everything all these families did. Nothing, every time, like it's a roadblock. You can, the other thing I realize is that so many people can listen to these cases. You can, you know, a lot of our courts record the audio and film these cases, right? And I just recommend it. I recommend for people to really learn, for people who really want that. But, yeah.
I feel like personally, like I am the definition of like the partnership with the type of oppression that you were speaking of. And I've always, since I was little and growing up in Portland, I've had this due diligence to work within the individualism that art codifies and romanticizes, to bring to bring that due diligence into a sense of dismantling the systemic racism that has been so embedded in the fabric of this country, and working exactly how power dynamics can shift in the city. And I do that through just a supporting role as an artist. And like today, I got off this call right before this with a group of artists that were, was painting all summer long downtown, street art. And there's an arts coalition, a group of artists have come together to kind of go up to battle with a lot of the leadership in the city and the way that the city operates. And, looking at like Brookfield Property Management, which is one of the largest realtors in the world, and how we can really start to demand and advocate for those communities. So I've always used my voice personally to wade through everything that everyone's been echoing about, and to kind of show up for the community here in ways to support the movement in any way, shape, and possible. And especially looking at Portland and as the the racist, one of the racist cities and states in Oregon and in the entire country. I think that it is up to artists and within myself, I found, since I was little, this need to show up in support and in solidarity for helping through those mediums.
We can't breathe! We can't breathe! We can't breathe! We can't breathe! We can't breathe!
Just one thing, like people can keep up with my case, because I'm expecting to have to go to trial for all this. But you can keep up with my case on like freetiana.com or the Free Tiana Coalition on Instagram. But like there's usually like action items like, oh, can you call this DA or this attorney general, or can you send an email to this person, because they're doing a bunch of shady stuff, and so there's always updates through there.
If y'all want to stay up to date on the mutual aid work that we're doing with the Peacekeeper Society, probably the best way to see what's going on the daily is following us on Instagram at peacekeepers_PDX or Peacekeeper Society _PDX, or on Facebook at Peacekeeper Society. If you want to see more about our work and what like mobilizing tribal trainers and wisdom keepers to promote positive social change looks like, check us out at peacekeepersociety.com. And we've got distributions coming up, food distros. We did some yesterday at the Delta Park houseless camps, as well as the Fox Run RV camps. We got some food distributions coming up in Hillsborough on the 29th and in Federal Way, Washington on the 10th. So if anyone is looking to get involved, volunteer. Jacinda was just at our last distribution in Tacoma, where we fed 4,127 families and with 200,000 pounds of food. So we're trying to keep the ball rolling and make sure that like all these communities who need it are getting exactly what they need.
You can keep up with me at my personal blog, which is coryspeaks.com. Corey's the first part of my name. And then my social media, my portfolio is all linked there, and people can always contact me for graphic design work, infographics, posters, anything like that.
I just want to say that I was just protesting in Kentucky on Bree Day, and the protest environment was so different, and it just felt so unified. And I felt like Portland was so unified at one point. We were making so much change and making so much progress in the movement, and it just seemed like some people lost interest. And I'm glad that I'm able to sit on a panel of people who actually still care and are dedicated to the movement, and not just the movement. You guys are always there for the community and are always providing mutual aid for the youth. So I just want to say thank you to everybody in here, and thank you for letting me speak and having me a part of this panel. And you guys can find me on Instagram at Ariana the Revolutionary.
You can follow my work and everything like that on Instagram at PDXWolf with a U. And so also I want to give out there that I do free photo shoots for Black women. That's any time of the year. Care if it's rain, shine, or storm, whatever. I'm there for you. And yeah, everything's on that page.
Anybody that's watching for Musicians in Solidarity and People Music, they're both musiciansinsolidarity.org and peoplemusic.org. So for any youth that are wanting art and music inspiration right now, lessons, or to work within music as a medium, those are two great websites to check out that I've been working with very closely in the last year or 2 years to continue to build for the community here.
Right now, I don't have any ongoing projects that I am doing myself. But right now I am offering, developing our stories of self, because it's really important for us to be able to communicate that in a way that is stronger. It took me a long time to perfect that, and through my learnings and teachings through fellowships and whatnot, I just want to share those skills. And hopefully in the future, I'm hoping to start some more mutual aid programs myself. And while I'm not doing a major project right now, I love to talk to folks about future projects down the line, support for projects and whatnot as well. You can contact me through my Instagram, which is my name spelled phonetically. So it's JUHSINDUH. And like I said, while I'm not taking on huge, big roles or doing a huge program, like Teresa knows I like to do, I am, taking my time to, instead of being like a leader, to work with other folks. As right now, I am on a leadership program for Planned Parenthood National Storytellers. And so I do a lot of that work. And right now I am training and leading other folks to go to, last year as a storyteller for Planned Parenthood, I was able to go on another panel, which for a major organizer conference, which was really awesome, talking about how abortion is essential, and also connecting that to Black liberation, Indigenous sovereignty, and revolutionary praxis and abolition. And, RJ, reproductive justice work, connects everything. And so that's something I'm really passionate about and hoping to do and dive more into the future as I tie up loose ends. I'm working on a website right now, /blog for myself, so I'll be able to put that up now or later down the line. But my goal is to support other folks and to have conversations like this. If somebody wants to create their own panel, I love to moderate or be a part of that. But with my background of this last year, creating that political action committee, doing electoral work, I'm now feeling great to transfer those things and teach folks how to do that, but not take that on all of myself. I want to prevent burnout, and I have been taking a lot of time to take care of myself. And so a lot of what I do is just community engagement through conversations of, how do you take care of yourself? Because self-care is revolutionary, but self-care doesn't mean that it is capitalist, right? A lot of folks try to make it this super capitalist thing where you have to buy face masks, or, you have to go buy a ton of things to learn how to take care of yourself. But I think that even in just this panel, this is how I'm able to take care of myself.
I think, one of the best things is I have, especially white people will often ask me questions, or repetitive questions. And I've made it clear, I'm not your Black Wikipedia. Google is free. And if you don't understand something, take the time to educate yourself. And we all can use education regardless of, regardless of experience. I've keep educating myself, and I find myself growing as an individual and a person. My main page is Danny Cage, and then an underscore at the end. And then my mutual aid group I'm part of is PDX Queer Front.
The best way is my Instagram. It's xochilt.art. I post a lot of work on there.
Street, our street, 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 our street, our street, our street, our street. Our streets. You guys haven't seen Peggy. Our